Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, and we're going to talk about focusing on the right thing at the wrong ratio. All right, so Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition has three pillars. Okay, it has combat, it has exploration, interaction, and combat. So these are the three pillars of Dungeons & Dragons. They're with the entire Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. And actually, I think they've been there 1, 2, 3, 4E, 5E. It's been there all along. It's just, it's been called different things at different times, right? And I think what Mike Mearls did in 2014 was he solidified them and made it concise and clear what we were doing. We were focusing on exploration, interaction, and combat. Those are the three pillars of the game, okay? All right, so if exploration, interaction, and combat are the three pillars of Dungeons & Dragons, they're all important. It's really important that we understand this, right? However, there has been a major problem on focusing on one of those above the other. And what I want to do is I'm going to explain this today in an IRL setting that I just encountered. All right. So so my church, they have a robust women's group. The women's group does probably 2 or 3 events a month. Our men's group is shockingly bad at doing anything. In fact, I would complain to my wife quite a bit, like last 2-3 years. I'd be like, how come the men's ministry at our church sucks? Like, we do 3 events a year. You guys do 3 events a month, right? And that's not an exaggeration. That's pretty much the real numbers, right? So basically, my wife was like, well, it's because the men don't get together and organize things and do things. So finally, I was like, okay, I get the hint, right? And I said, okay, I'm going to do a men's Bible study. So I did. I stood it up. I said, we're going to do, so I went to the pastor. I said, here's the plan. Mark the entire book. It has 16 chapters in it. We're going to cover 2 chapters a week, and we're going to go for 8 weeks straight, October and November. And by the way, we just had our last meeting tonight, right? But last week we hit this wall, and what was the wall? So I saw it coming. We were in chapters 13 and chapters 14 of Mark, and we hit this end times theology verse, right? And end times theology is like Revelation. It's anything that has to do with, and then Jesus is going to descend from the sky, and he's going to rapture everybody, and all the Christians and all the lost people are going to remain, and then there's the millennium, 1,000-year reign on here on earth, and then we all go to heaven, right? Like now, so I knew the second I saw an end time theology Mark verse, something that aligned with what's in Revelation, that some of the brothers in Christ were going to get real specific and want to talk about this in depth, and that's exactly what happened, right? So basically, we hit this verse, and the first thing is, one of the guys comes forward, and he goes, I'm pre-trib, so this is how it is. And then goes into a big, long scree about and first of all, a couple people were like, did you say a preacher? And he's like, no, pre-trib. And people were like, preacher bib? Like, preacher bib? And he's like, pre-trib. And so one of the other brothers in Christ said, let me explain. Post-tribulation rapture, mid-tribulation rapture, pre-tribulation rapture. When does the rapture happen? Does it happen after the 7 years of suffering? Does it happen in the middle of the 7 years of suffering? Does it happen before the 7 years of suffering, right? And so it just completely derailed the Bible study, and the whole thing like turned into a pre-trib, post-trib, millennial, like dagger fest, right? Over people who care a whole lot about, does the tribulation happen, then the rapture happen? Is there going to be a 1,000-year reign on earth? Is there not going to be a 1,000-year reign on earth? And and all this really deep, super deep, discussion of the end times theology, right? Now, I have an opinion on end times theology. So first of all, I read my Bible back cover to cover, and then I start again. I don't spend years studying one book, right? And that's one of the reasons why I'm really kind of against end time theology focus, right? Now, we cannot ignore Revelation. We can't ignore Daniel. We can't ignore the end time theology verses that are in any of the Bible, right? We can't. But I have I've been a Christian since I was 15 years old. That was in 1985. So that's been 15, 21, 36 years. I've been a Christian for 36 years, right? And one of the things I've seen in that 36 years is there's almost no better way to make sure that you never apply the Bible than to become an end times theologist, right? If you study Revelation again and again and you cross-reference it with Daniel and you look up all the other verses on the end time theology, there's a lot of brothers in Christ who like to get into this. And by the way, it might be actually I've never met a sister in Christ who was like really, really into end time theology. If you've met a few of them, let me know. Maybe it's just my experience, but like this seems to be a brothers in Christ issue. But they get into it, and I think one of the reasons why is it's one of the areas where you can like really focus and never grow as a Christian, or it's the easiest to not grow as a Christian because you're worrying about this thing that's going to happen once in 25, in 3,000 or 4,000 years. And all the stuff that's like, hey, you should treat your neighbor well. Don't covet your neighbor's wife. Don't murder. Don't steal. All these like highly applicable things just got left behind, right? No pun intended. Truly no pun intended there. All right, only Christians are going to get that joke. All right, that very unintentional joke. All right, so here's the issue. How does post-tribulation end-time theology myopathy link to Dungeons & Dragons? It is perfectly acceptable to study end-time theology, but not more than the rest of the Bible, right? Here's the issue. It is perfectly acceptable to focus on combat in Dungeons & Dragons, but not more than exploration or interaction, right? And if you are focusing on combat, and if you think Dungeons & Dragons is a combat game and not an exploration game and not an interaction game, you're doing it so you won't grow. You are keeping the focus on combat so you are not culturally, socially, emotionally, intellectually challenged. That's the reason, okay? So don't make the pre-trib mistake, right? Focus on all of them, right? Put as much focus on the exploration and the interaction in your game as you do in the combat. It's important, right? And make sure that you're not staying focused on the combat aspect of the game so that you don't personally grow. Because in Dungeons & Dragons, if you hit all three pillars at the right tone, at the same frequency, at the same criticality, you're bringing the same risk, the same focus, the same attention, the same love for all three pillars, you will grow. But if you myopically focus on combat, just as brothers in Christ don't grow when they focus on pre-tribulation end times theology, you will not grow as a dungeon master or as a player or as a person, right? And if you look and you focus on all three pillars of Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, you will grow as a person. All that's my opinion. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Also, if you are a Christian, are you post-trib, mid-trib, or pre-trib? You got this one video to give me everything you got in the comments below. All that's my opinion. Take care and have a wonderful, wonderful Thanksgiving. And all the best to all of you. Take care.